So today I'm going to be talking about the Chamber of Secrets of the Chamber of Secrets, which the Chamber of Secrets is in and of itself a Chamber of Secrets, um, which reinforces my point about that I talked about with Order of the Phoenix, how I think these Harry Potter titles are more interesting than you think. Lots of people, fans, propose new titles, and I think none of them really work because they misunderstand what the work is really talking about. The work, and also how the colorful titles, the cryptic titles almost, are a really key. They're really key in understanding the true meaning of these stories, right? And that's part of the reason why I love it so much. Their cryptography, code, secrets, and all that kind of stuff is very fascinating. And especially in this one, you will see how it is even more of a mystery novel than the first one, or a mystery movie, if you're going off of the movies. I go off of both for reference. The books and the movies do not contradict in my eye. They kind of create one grand continuum in my head of the Harry Potter universe. Now, Chamber of Secrets, right out of the get-go, to kind of analyze it from a bird's eye view, is it's even darker than Sorcerer's Stone. It's even more mythological, and it's even more mysterious, right? The Chamber of Secrets. What is this Chamber of Secrets? How does this relate to the story? These fascinating questions. And so we learn that the Chamber of Secrets is an ancient hidden evil in the underworld of Hogwarts that most of the people don't even think is real, right? Which I brought up in my first video I made in this Harry Potter series. How you see a theme in almost every one of these stories of people not wanting to admit that evil has returned, right? Like I talked about in Order of the Phoenix with Fudge. Oh, Voldemort's not back. Oh, no, he's not back, right? Exactly. So in this one, in the opening, obviously, it reinforces Harry's isolation, and he feels kind of anxious because he expected all of his friends to write to him, and he hasn't received one letter. And he has to deal, of course, with his suburban boomer aunt and uncle and their son, who is probably even worse. Now, right at the get-go in this story, there's omens, right? Omens of death, right? He meets Dobby, the house elf, the slave class, right, who serve the aristocratic pureblood families, right? The most infamous being the Malfoys, who have a uncomfortably large influence in the Ministry of Magic, which we'll talk about later. And it's really sad. Dobby, he speaks in third person, he commits self-harm, which just kind of goes to show you, like, we don't need to see sequences of Dobby being mistreated by his lords, his masters, the Malfoys. We just kind of need to, like, you can kind of get the sense of how he is treated, right? And that he's being treated poorly merely just by his demeanor and how he carries himself, right? Like I said, he commits self-harm, speaks in third person, but in spite of all of the trauma he has received from being a slave, he still acts as a faithful servant to Harry. And you can see kind of the difference in how Harry treats Dobby as opposed to the Malfoys, which I think is interesting. And Harry is just baffled by how he is treated. And this interaction when he meets Dobby, and Dobby tells him that somebody doesn't want to go, somebody does not want him to go back to Hogwarts, right? And Dobby hid all of his letters, right? So Dobby's kind of a trickster character, but he still is good, and he is on Harry's side. What this introduction and interaction does is goes to show you how Harry is still learning a lot about the wizarding world, right? Obviously, in the first one, he got some kind of sense that not all wizards are good, right? Obviously, Hagrid told him that when he told him the story of Voldemort, and he could see that not everyone who went to Hogwarts thought the same as the Weasleys, right? Like Malfoy and a lot of the Slytherin, the students of Slytherin House. So Dobby, and in the way he sees how the Malfoys treat him, and presumably other pureblood families, the elite families, treat their house elves. This just goes to show Harry's learning more about just how bad the world can be, right? Even in this enchanted wizarding world that he has discovered, right? And I think that that's very applicable to our own lives, right? Because, like I talked about, Sorcerer's Stone is kind of like mirrors the initiation process of us Christians, how our lives are an initiation, right, to come to Christ. But once we sort of cross the threshold, we discover that things in a lot of areas can be very muddy, right? And it can be very confusing because, of course, that's what the devil wants, right? The devil wants to lie to us, and he wants to cloud everything. And when you study the history of the church and history of any human society ever, there's always these undercurrents of evil, right? Now, Ron and his brothers come to rescue Harry after he is essentially imprisoned by his boomer uncle. After Dobby framed him by putting the cake, on his, I think, you see, he's just, the Dursleys just care about status and materialism, and they're very tacky, right? Which I know that is poking fun of, like, that culture in the UK at that time. And so he gets framed. So then obviously Uncle Vernon is just livid. He locks him up in his room, puts like 7 different locks or something like that. And so Ron, Harry's best friend, and his brothers, Fred and George, come to rescue Harry. And they succeed, and they take him back to the Burrow. Now, the Burrow is interesting because it's like the safe haven place, right? It's very similar to Rivendell or something like that. It's the place where the characters get rejuvenated. It's very warm. Friends, family, right? And so this is the first time that Harry enters a magical household, and he is just so in awe by everything he sees. And of course, to Ron and his brothers, that's because that's everything they grew up with. They don't really think about it too much. And I think this is interesting because you could see how, and keep in mind, if you interpret the story differently, that's cool. This is just how I interpret it as a Catholic, and I think this is how it applies to my paradigm. It's interesting because the Weasleys are almost like cradle Catholics, right? Ron is, he's born into this wizarding world, and he's known about it this whole time. And so you can see how there are a lot of things that I guess I wouldn't say take it for granted, because I think that's not giving enough credit to Ron or his family, but how, because he's just been baked into this culture, this way of life from the get-go, certain things that to Harry, when he's just seeing all this, because Harry's almost like a revert, right? He rediscovers his roots because of his inheritance was robbed from him by Voldemort. And so he comes into this, and he's just so in awe. And this is how a lot of Catholics are in real life, how a lot of people say, like, the converts or the reverts, they're actually more into it than the cradle Catholics, the people that were born Catholic. For those who don't know, that's what that means. Yeah, and the Weasleys are just the best, right? Loving mother, loving father, loads of kids, right? They're trad, essentially. Um, Ron and his brothers, they play sports, right? They goof off, they roughhouse. The dad is just, he's so kind, he's so loving. Um, and he just works tirelessly for his family. And so does the mother. She keeps Molly Weasley keeps everything in the house clean and whatnot and orderly, and she just she's the hearth of the household. And you could see how. Sorry, I'm going off of the notes on my computer here on the bottom. Now, when they are getting ready to go to Diagon Alley, right, the place from the first movie where like the wizarding sort of Times Square or just center of commerce, Fred or George, and you say you're our mother, I can't remember which one it was, says that so they get the list of the school books and supplies that they need, and Fred says it's very expensive, but Mrs. Weasley says, we'll manage, right? This just goes to show you how the Weasley parents prioritize and care more about their children's education than status or materialism, right? Or even looking respectable to the sort of, like I have established, the satanic Illuminati, cryptocratic society, the Death Eaters, the Malfoys, the Purebloods, all the usual suspects, all these adjectives you can use to describe to define this elite that's in the background, who is controlling the ministry, by the way. How they don't care about looking respectable, looking good. Like they don't. Like Mr. Weasley is fascinated by Muggle stuff, right? Like he asks Harry, "Can you tell me what is the proper function of a rubber duck?" Right? Because I mean, that's what it's like to him. He has no idea what it is, and he's curious to know. And this, like I've talked about, reminds me a lot of me, right, in my family, because my family and I have always been fascinated by other cultures, right, and how something that it's so different from us, yet they're still human beings, right? And that's really the thing, is you could see how the Weasleys, even if they're purebloods or whatever, they respect all human life, right? And now just because Mr. Weasley is fascinated by Muggles and Muggle culture, or how me is fascinated with, Indian culture, for example. I really like Indian culture, history, the aesthetic, the language and whatnot. It's fascinating to me. That does not mean that Mr. Weasley and I are. It's just funny how you could talk about these characters because they just feel so real, right? Rowling nailed this. These types and archetypes, right? Mr. Weasley and I, in appreciating and being fascinated by other cultures, does not mean that we're denouncing our own culture, right? We're not self-hating white people. That could not be further from the truth. I love my culture, and Mr. Weasley, of course, loves his own wizarding culture. And when Lucius Malfoy and Arthur Weasley have their little face-off, and Malfoy calls him a disgrace to the name of wizard, and you don't even get paid for it, Mr. Weasley doesn't really care, and he says, we have a very different idea of what disgraces the name of wizard. Sorry, my phone literally ran out of space when I was recording that video, so I guess I might figure out some way to combine that with this, or just have it part 1, part 2. Either way, as I was saying, in this story, Harry gets exposed to the multiple stratas, or different demographics of the wizarding society, the wizarding world, and even gets into sort of like the creatures, right? And other sort of people that don't quite fit the human category, so to speak, right? So he visits Nearly Headless Nick. He goes to his death day, right? Like Happy Death Day. I think the ghosts celebrate the day that they died, right? And so he goes almost to like the city of the dead or something like that, right? The city of the ghosts. He even goes to the Spider Society, right? The Spider World and the Forbidden Forest when he tries to find Aragog, Hagrid's former pet spider, who was he was framed for killing the girl in the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago, right? The killing of the girl, the Muggle-born girl. This is ritual human sacrifice, right? And the Illuminati stand-ins, the Malfoys or the purebloods or the Death Eaters. I don't think the word Death Eater is mentioned in this storybook or movie. I don't think we learned that until Goblet of Fire, but we know, I mean, because you got to remember, guys, we're even though I'm talking about just this story, you kind of have to talk about it in light of everything. So you can, I mean, obviously this doesn't mean I'm going to be bringing in points too much from the other stories, but it's worth just kind of noting here and there things that apply and the overlap and whatnot. And not only does he learn about the different demographics and subcultures and undercurrents in the Wizarding Society, he learns that a lot of them are actually evil and are, or at least morally ambiguous, right? So he gets introduced to this method of transportation called Floo powder by the Weasleys, but it goes horribly wrong, diagonally, and he ends up in Nocturne Alley, right? Which is a much more nefarious seeming sort of inversion of Diagon Alley. And interestingly enough, the way he gets out of there is through Hagrid. He finds Hagrid there, which I think this is interesting and worth noting how him being reintroduced to Hagrid is actually in this Nocturne Alley, which kind of sets the stage for a sense of moral ambiguity, confusion, right? And that's a big theme here, is the question Harry is wondering, am I no different than Voldemort? I mean, we share all these similarities. Harry comes to learn that he, while he was aware of it because he spoke to the snake in the first one with the Vanishing Glass, Harry has the unique ability in the wizarding world to speak to snakes. He can speak Parseltongue. He's a Parselmouth, which he thinks is no big deal, but actually comes to learn that this is not a very common gift in the wizarding world. In fact, it's very clearly connected, obviously through the symbolism of the serpent. It's connected to the demonic or the devil, or whatever you want to call it. It's clearly not something that is really good, right? And so you see how Harry realizes that while he did receive a lot of these blessings from his mother sacramentally, he becomes aware that his person, right, body, soul, and mind, have in a sense been compromised, right? So when Voldemort, when he defeated Voldemort when he was a baby, Dumbledore tells him that Voldemort transferred some of his powers to him. Now, whether or not he intended to do that is unclear, but I think it's easy to say that Voldemort did not intend that. So, he sees the Sorting Hat, which, remember in the first one, the Sorting Hat told him that he was going to put him in Slytherin, and he would have done great things in Slytherin. But Harry, he makes the choice not to be, right? Which is the big central theme of the story. Dumbledore tells him in the end, our choices are what show us who we really are, far more than our abilities, right? And so this, continuing the trend from the last one, you could see how it is specifically the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher who is a fraud. Now, last time, it's pretty unclear how Quirrell got there and how Voldemort compromised him, or whether or not Dumbledore knew about this, but that's beside the point. You can see clearly here that this is some sort of industry plan, right? Like I've talked about in the other videos, the Defense Against the Dark Arts is quite possibly the most important class at Hogwarts you can come to see. It's almost like learning, to fight against demonic forces, right? And so it makes sense, given how the Death Eaters have a disproportionate influence in the Ministry, and the Ministry eventually tries to subvert Hogwarts, and kind of seemingly has always kind of been there because it's a complex relationship mirroring real world geopolitics. It makes sense how they would want to subvert that teacher the most, right? And you can see this in the real world, how churches and Christianity is always, the powers that be always try to subvert it, co-opt it, suppress it, do whatever they can to, they want to suppress real Christianity, right? And or traditional ideas, right? Now, like I said, whether or not Dumbledore knows about this is still a little unclear. In fact, it might even be less clear in this one. Now, does this bother me? Not really. Because ultimately I do think Dumbledore is this providential figure. And I think that, and we could see this in the real world, how God, while he didn't create evil, God tolerates there being evil. And he can actually use evil as a weapon against itself, right? Which Harry will later do with his confrontation with the Basilisk, right? And so, okay, they got the magical racism. And you can see how Mr. Weasley is just, he's very much like this perfect balance, right? The beautiful Catholic balance. He is a balance between this sort of far right and far left. He is just a normal dude. He's a normal man. He loves normal things, simple things. He's the everyman, right? And he's just great, right? Now, let's see what else I got. You can also see an interesting thing, how the Death Eaters also hijack and compromise Quidditch, right? Well, you see how they buy the entire Slytherin team. Draco's dad buys the whole team the newest brooms, right? So it's sort of like a pay to win. And that also could be related to the kind of compromise we see in sports now with all this sports betting and all that stuff. It might be a little, that might not be that related to that, but I thought that was an interesting idea and worth bringing up. So all of this starts to go downhill when the trio come across Mr. Filch, the boomer caretaker. His cat is hanging on the wall and is petrified. And on the the adjacent wall, I believe, it is written in blood, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. Enemies of the air, beware." So you can see how the enemy very much likes to speak in code, right? And it is later revealed at the end. The movie, I think, kind of rushed it, and it was all of a sudden the reveal that it was Ginny, Ron's sister, who was doing it, kind of like she was possessed, right? Like she wasn't evil. She was just heavily possessed through this diary that I'll talk about in a second. And so you can see how the enemy likes to communicate in code, right? And so Harry discovers in the bathroom when they're brewing the Polyjuice potion it's just crazy, all this stuff. Like, it's almost like a detective story. When they're brewing the Polyjuice potion and all that stuff, he comes across this mysterious diary, whose name written on it is Tom Riddle. Riddle, code, right? like I talked about, the enemy using code to reveal itself. Now, that's not saying that code, like, because I've talked about code all the time. I think it's really cool. I'm not saying that code isn't inherently connected to all of these bad things. I just think it's interesting how this story shows how real world evil operates. And this diary very much, my brother actually brought this to my attention, and I really agreed with him. Shout out if you're watching this. How this diary very much functions like an AI. You can write whatever you want in it, ask it questions, and it gives you an answer. It can show you images, right? It brings Harry into a flashback, right, from the past that Voldemort put there, because we come to realize that Tom Riddle, shocker, is Voldemort. Yeah, and so there was an interesting thing. Hold on one second. So the diary, like I said, it's very much like an AI, and I think this story was very prophetic in that regard, right? And you see how this diary is very addictive, and it heavily compromises, possesses Ginny Weasley, and it terrifies her. Like literally, she's writing messages in blood. Whose blood is this? I mean, it's very dark, right? However, just because these dark forces are at play does not mean that there isn't still good, and that Harry will not come to save the day. He does. Let's see. So you can see the sorry, I'm just going on my notes. They're kind of unorganized. Like I said, I just like to be riffing and all that kind of stuff. Let's see. And so this is also the first time in the story where Harry is uncomfortable with talking about things with Dumbledore. And he sees that Tom Riddle actually went through the same thing, right? Like I said, this story is where it introduces the whole similarities and overlap between Harry and Voldemort, and he starts to kind of wonder, like, what really is it that makes me different than Voldemort? And you could see that not only what makes him different than Voldemort is that he knows the power of love, which Voldemort knows not. You can see that a big reason that makes him different than Voldemort is that Harry is completely loyal to Voldemort. Oh man, I just fumbled. He is completely loyal to Dumbledore, which you can see that Voldemort, Tom Riddle, was not, right? Dumbledore to him is just kind of like this, very much like a Freudian, like the father who failed him, right? The father figure who failed him, and I need to rebel against the man and all that kind of stuff, right? And there's an interesting development, right? So the Muggle-born students in the school are under attack, right? They're being targeted. And we come to learn that what is doing all of this is the basilisk, right? The ancient primordial, just angel of death, giant snake, right? Who is, of course, a tool of Voldemort and the Coomer Goblin elite. It is almost like it's just like this Illuminati ritual human sacrifice angel of death machine, right? That, I mean, like it's like their wet dream, right? To go, the Coomer Goblin elite, to show you how evil these people are. Now, sorry, what else was I gonna say? So the basilisk, like I said, is very much like this primordial evil. And this is where when Harry goes into the Chamber of Secrets, right, he descends into the underworld, which is very mythological. It's very classical, right? The Aeneid, Dante's Inferno. There's always this theme of the hero descending into the underworld or the labyrinth, right? And so when he gets into the Chamber of Secrets, and the movie actually did a good job showing how you see the statue of Salazar Slytherin, these snakes lined up, and you see the reflection, the puddle, right, kind of showing you the as above, so below. I thought that was really well done. And Harry has to face the serpent, right? He's St. George. Now, before the serpent is revealed, he meets the ghost of Tom Riddle, right? And so Ginny is there. That's the whole reason why he goes down there. He has to save the damsel in distress, right? When the fake and gray, you guys can see how I'm a big Jay Dyer fan. Shout out if you're watching this too. You can see how the fake industry plant Weasel is not able to save the damsel in distress. You need the real hero, right? With real grounding and real allies, who is aligned with truth to save the damsel in distress, enslave the serpent, and complete the Chad mythical tale, right? And so as Harry slowly realizes, okay, maybe this Tom Riddle dude is evil, and then it's revealed, oh, shocker, like I said, he's Voldemort. Now, he basically explains how he tried to get to Harry, saying that he showed him the flashback with Hagrid, or, how he framed that stupid oaf Hagrid, right? Which, of course, Harry, he's loyal to his friends. When he hears this, he's like, don't you dare say that about Hagrid. He's my friend, right? And, of course, to us, the audience, the readers, the viewers, we would feel the same way, right? Because who doesn't love Hagrid? As they say at the end, it's just not Hogwarts without you, Hagrid. And unfortunately, we see that Hagrid becomes a victim of the Azkaban prison industrial complex, right? Who is sent there because, he has a bad record, right? And you can see how the Minister of Magic is heavily, he doesn't even really run anything. He just kind of takes the lead from Lucius Malfoy, right? And so Hagrid is sentenced to the prison industrial complex, right? And they also kick out Dumbledore, right? And you can see Lucius Malfoy, being the literal snake that he is, and he's, of course, behind and involved, or at least involved or aware of what's going on with the basilisk and the attacks on the Muggle-born children. He can use this as a way to frame Dumbledore, right? So you can see there's crazy espionage type stuff, blackmail going on. And he's like, well, you see all of this, these kids being petrified, is happening under Dumbledore. So you see, it's Dumbledore's fault. He's got to go, right? And of course, the minister's, okay, whatever. And so Dumbledore's gone, but as he cryptically tells Harry and Ron, when they're in the invisibility cloak, in Hagrid's hut, he says, help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it, right? And you can see this going retroactively. We're going to go back to Harry's confrontation with the snake, right? So Tom Riddle, when he reveals his true identity, he says, let me go up and see what he was talking about. So he says, do you really think I would keep my filthy Muggle father's name? He says he fashioned a new name that he knew that everyone would fear when he would become the greatest sorcerer in the world. And of course, Harry, being the brave boy that he is, retaliates and calls him out on this BS, just like he did in the last one. And he tells him, no, Albus Dumbledore is the greatest sorcerer in the world. And then it's this back and forth. Tom Riddle goes, Dumbledore was driven out of this castle by the mere memory of me, flaunting just how much, how evil and how much influence this, perverts the whole society and the world. And then Harry firmly tells him he'll never be gone. not as long as there are those who remain and are loyal to him. And you know what happens right after he says that? Fawkes. Fawkes comes swooping in. Fawkes, Dumbledore's pet phoenix. The phoenix, the bird that rises from the ashes, right? Another omen, talking about what Harry will eventually have to go through later in the series. And like I've talked about, and I don't want to exhaust too much, how Fawkes the Phoenix is very much a Holy Spirit type character. He's a bird, right, which recalls images of the dove, and he's almost like the love that is what binds Harry and Dumbledore together, right? Proceeds from the Father and the Son. And he comes in this moment of need to give Harry the Sorting Hat, right? And of course, Harry doesn't know what this is. However, he's just gonna trust him, right? And later, Dumbledore tells him that Fawkes came to his aid because Harry had put his complete trust in him, right? That's a huge theme in this story, and of course, all of the other stories, that of loyalty, right? Harry, he always puts his faith in Dumbledore because he knows that, like I said, Dumbledore functions almost like a icon of God the Father. He's the ultimate authority, source of wisdom, and he trusts Dumbledore, you know? Now, Harry realizes that he sees emerging from the Sorting Hat a sword, right? Which we learn later is the sword of Godric Gryffindor, the person who founded, one of the 4 Hogwarts founders. He founded the House of Gryffindor, right? And so you can see how this weapon is almost like Harry's, like his divine right. He has a real spiritual connection and inheritance to this sword, which shows how Harry truly is a Gryffindor, right? And we do learn later that both Harry and Voldemort are descended from the Peverell line, so you can see they're related. However, you can see very clearly in this story, with the whole magical racism and all that kind of stuff, how mere blood or lineage doesn't really get you anywhere in terms of salvation, right? It is your character, it is your choices, right? It's you have to be you have to be like how would I say, it's well, I mean, it's not a question of, like, are you Muggle born or are you not? Well, it's like, well, are you on the line? Are you in line with truth, right? That's really the big thing. And so this, the Sword of Gryffindor, right? This is very mythological, right? Because Harry doesn't bring this sword in. It's not just like any old sword. It appears to him when he needs it, and he slays the serpent, the basilisk, right? With the Sword of Gryffindor, very much like a holy relic. And this, I mean, all cultures, right, have some kind of concept of the slaying of the serpent, right? In Norse mythology, you have, I believe it's Ragnarok, right? The prophecy of the end of the world, right, where Thor will be united with his hammer Mjolnir and will destroy Jormungandr, I think is how you pronounce it, the colossal sea serpent, the legendary sea serpent of Norse mythology, who wraps around the whole world. And you can see that in the design of the door to the Chamber of Secrets, right? Which that's a very pagan idea, right? Of the kind of, and Nietzschean too, right? Like the cycle of eternal return, right? The snake that eats itself, the Ouroboros, right? And you can eventually see how the basilisk's venom actually can be used as a weapon against evil, right? Because Harry eventually uses the basilisk fang to destroy this occult object, right? The diary, which is clarified in Half-Blood Prince that this is a Horcrux, right? That Voldemort has hidden a part of his soul in there after splitting it through murder. And The whole thing with the AI connection, which not many people have really talked about. I'm not trying to say I'm some genius, because like I said, I didn't. I was not even the person who thought of it. It was my brother. Kudos to him. Um, Now, it is really peculiar, the language that is used here and the way that Tom Riddle describes the diary and his comments about it. Right before Harry destroys the diary, right? When he destroys the serpent, he unfortunately, one of the basilisk's fang hits him, and so now he is infected with the basilisk venom, and so he thinks he's okay. I'm gonna die. Now, Tom Riddle thinks he has won, and he says, "Funny, the damage a silly little book can do, especially in the hands of a silly little girl." And I think this is very important, given how much kids are given these smartphones, tablets, AI, whatever it is, so early, right? And how harmful that is, right? And what was super duper fascinating, I looked it up, and it would be an excellent question for Mr. J. Dyer. That the basilisk, there's multiple manifestations of the basilisk in the world. So you have the mythological basilisk, and right, which is primarily what this story is drawing from. And it's interesting because even the spiders fear the basilisk, just showing how it's just this colossal devouring machine, right, that doesn't even discriminate, right? Only Voldemort can control it, right? Showing how if he really wanted to, he could just use the basilisk to kill whoever he wanted, right? Even the people that are his servants, right? Showing how he doesn't know what love is, right? Like, do you really think that Malfoy and Voldemort really love each other? Not in that sense, of course. But do you really think that they're good friends? They're really friends? No, they're not. Now, there's also the basilisk in the sort of non-mythological sense. In our present day, the species of lizard, actually, funnily enough, the Jesus lizard, the lizard that can walk on water or run on water or whatever it is, that sometimes is referred to as the basilisk. Now, is that related to the other things I'm talking about? I don't think so, but I thought it was worth bringing up. But the most interesting piece of information I got on the basilisk is that it is actually a term used in the tech bro world, right? You can see where I'm going with this. And it is this is per Google, right? Basilisk is a thought experiment, a philosophical concept in futurism, proposing that a super intelligent, benevolent AI in the future might retroactively punish humans who did not help bring it into existence, right? So in this story, you can see that there is a clear sort of warning against AI and the technocratic global order, which is what's going on in our real world, right? And I think this is genius. And you can see Harry is St. George. It's the Chad mythical tale. He descends into the underworld, saves the damsel in distress, and slays the serpent with the sword of Gryffindor with the aid of Fawkes the Phoenix, the apex bird, who, like I said, is not only a figure of a sort of icon of the Holy Spirit, he's also very much, just to show you how much of the apex bird he is, he's very much the master of the four elements, right? When I'm talking about the four elements of the ancient world, he is fire, right, by nature of being a phoenix, so he's the master of fire. He is the master of air, of course, because by nature of being a bird. Now he's the master of water because his tears have healing powers, right? Which is actually what saves Harry from his from his wound from the basilisk thing. And he is the master of earth, of course, because he rises from the ashes, right? Yeah, so I think I said everything I wanted to say. Any thoughts, ideas, agreements, disagreements, I would love to hear them. You guys can leave those in the comments. I really appreciate you guys coming along with me on this Harry Potter journey. As you guys know, I really love Harry Potter. I think there's lots of great things in it. Lots of great things that we as Catholics can appreciate and we don't have to be scared about. In fact, I think that this is actually something that, I mean, I can't say we need it, right? Because it's not required for salvation. That's not what I'm saying. But we need it in the sense that we need Tolkien, right? Man needs myth. We're mythological creatures, right? I mean, myths, stories, lore, folklore, that's how human beings really interpret the world. Like, we don't interpret the world, at least in the same way, with like, you know, mere facts and like science and stuff like that, and like microscope. Like, if we just get the microscope, if we could just look further, then we're going to understand all of reality. And of course, we as Catholics, we as people who have been classically educated, know that that is not the case, right? That is not how you understand man, nor is it how you understand God or the world around you. You understand all of those things through stories, myth. Myth, of course, not meaning lies. Rather, it just means, myth is stories, right? Mostly enchanted stories that humans use for meaning. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate you guys watching. Just like and subscribe, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it.